Hey everybody, today I'm going to transfer my floppy disks from 35 years ago that I used with my TRS-80 color computer over to my hard drive using DriveWire. Let's go! So I will be using a DriveWire cable to connect my Coco to the PC. One end of the cable is an RS-232C connector that goes into the Coco, and the other is a serial port connector, and that goes into the PC. A lot of modern PCs do not have serial ports anymore. Mine did not. So I ended up getting a USB serial port adapter for my PC. It was recommended to me that I get an FTDI chipset serial port adapter, so I did. The brand I picked was StarTech, no particular reason, I just found them. One of the things I'm concerned about is whether this actually works. I don't want to connect everything all at once and then find out, oh, nothing works, and I don't know why nothing works. So the first thing I'm going to do is to test this out. And the way to test it out is you can take a paper clip and you can connect two of the pins of this, and it will create a loopback. So that's the first thing we're going to do. We're going to do a loopback test of this and make sure that this cable works. So I've opened up Device Manager and I'm looking under ports, and it shows that I already have a COM port, a serial port, even though I haven't actually plugged in the serial port adapter. So the motherboard seems to think I have a serial port somewhere, but I disagree, and there isn't really anything there. So I'm going to plug in the serial port adapter now, the USB serial port adapter. We should see a new entry show up. And here we got COM3. So this is my new serial port from what I just plugged in. I've got PuTTY sitting here. You can use this to communicate in various ways. I'm going to pick the serial port. I'm going to say let's talk on COM3. I'm going to say open. And so this gives me a terminal that I can use to communicate on COM3. Now I'm going to type A and nothing shows up. I'm going to type B, nothing shows up. I'm going to type C, nothing shows up. This is because I don't have the loopback set up yet. So that's what I need to do. So now it's time to do the loopback test. In order to do that, I need to connect pins 2 and 3 together. If you hold it like this, where the row of 5 pins is above the row of 4 pins, pins 2 and 3 are, if you start counting from the left, 1 and then 2, 3. It's hard to hold it up while I'm showing you. But you want to do something like this. I got a paper clip. You want to hold it like right so it's making contact between pins 2 and 3 without like touching the other pins. It's kind of tough to do that with one hand while you're typing with the other, but we'll see. Let's see. So now that I have pins 2 and 3 connected, I'm going to try this again. I'm going to go onto COM3. Open. So let's type A and see what happens. A, B, C, D. Oh, very nice. So what's happening is pin 3 is the transmit and pin 2 is the receive. And so every time I transmit something out, it gets received directly through my paperclip into the receive pin and bounces back. That's our loopback. So I now have pretty good confidence that this USB serial port adapter works. So now I can go on to step 2 and connect the DriveWire cable. Before running DriveWire, it'll help to go over some basic theory about how the drives are numbered and how they're managed. Originally, you would have a Coco, maybe 40 years ago, and you'd have a floppy drive, and you'd be very happy. And some people had more floppy drives. You could actually have up to 4, and they were very happy. And if you did, you knew that they were numbered starting at 0. So the very first floppy drive would be drive 0, and you would type that command into Disk Extended Color Basic to tell it that from this point forward, all commands go to drive 0. Or you could type drive 1 to tell it to go to the second drive, and so on. And that's how you would refer to them, how you would number them. If you're using DriveWire, it's a little bit different. You have a connection from your Coco RS-232C into your serial port on your PC, and you're running DriveWire. And in DriveWire, you also have 4 drives starting at 0. But these are different. These are not floppy drives. These are virtual hard drives. So to refer to them, you would use a new command in HDB-DOS, which is the DOS you use when you're using DriveWire on the Coco. And you would use drive #0 to tell it, I want to talk to hard drive 0, or drive #1, and so on to refer to the other hard drives. Hard drives store a lot more than a floppy drive does, and the way the Coco deals with it is by treating it as if it's a whole bunch of floppies. So for example, if you were referring to hard drive #0, within that would be a whole bunch of floppies. You could have hundreds of these things. I'm just putting 6 up here on the screen for now, but there could be a lot more. So how do you tell DriveWire which of these floppies you're referring to? That's when you use the old command drive 0, drive 1, and so on. So it's basically a combination of a couple things. First you say drive pound to tell it which hard drive you want, and then you do the drive command to tell it which floppy inside the hard drive you're referring to. So for example, if I wanted to refer to drive #1, I would say drive #1, and then it would be connected to its own floppies. Again, it could be hundreds, it could be a whole bunch of this. So that's how things work with DriveWire. Where it gets interesting is what happens when you have both a physical floppy and DriveWire at the same time, which is what I'm going to be doing because I need to back my floppies up. So I have my Coco, I have my physical drive 0, I also have DriveWire, and I have perhaps a virtual drive 0 attached to the virtual hard drive. And here there's a conflict. If I were to type drive 0 into the Coco, which one am I referring to? Am I referring to my physical floppy drive, or am I referring to the virtual floppy drive on the virtual hard drive that I'm currently using? So in order to deal with that ambiguity, there's a new command called drive on or drive off. When you type drive on into the Coco, that tells the Coco to completely ignore all of your floppy drives, and instead these commands, drive 0, drive 1, drive 2, drive 3, shall refer to the floppies that are virtual connected to the hard drive that's virtual, and it will just completely ignore your physical floppy drives. And in fact, this is the default. If you don't say drive on at all, this is what will happen. If you say drive 0, you're referring to the DriveWire virtual floppy. You're not referring to your physical floppy. The reason this is the default, most likely, is because HDB-DOS figured, well, if you're using HDB-DOS, it's because you're using this new hard drive technology and you don't want to use your floppies anymore. But of course, like in my situation, sometimes you do need to refer to the physical floppies. So for that, there's the drive off command. That basically turns off these floppies in DriveWire so that you can use your your physical floppies on the Coco. So with drive off, now when I say drive 0, 1, 2, or 3, I'm referring to my physical floppies. But then that means I can't get to my DriveWire floppies, but that's okay because I can get to the higher numbered DriveWire floppies just fine because there's no conflict. So here's the deal. I say drive off, and then I can back up from my physical drive 0 to my virtual drive 4, or 5, or 6, or 7. And I'll just leave these virtual floppies blank. So I'm going to create a huge virtual hard drive with a whole bunch of floppies, and I'll just forget about the first 4, and I'll just start using them starting at the 5th and so on. And that's how I'm going to get everything backed up. So we're almost ready to actually run DriveWire, but I first need to set up my virtual hard drives. So to do that, I'm going to use the command line tools from the Toolshed project, which I'll link to in the description. The Toolshed project has this command called decb, which stands for Disk Extended Color Basic, and it has several commands that should look familiar to anyone who's used Radio Shack Disk DOS, because they're based on, or many of them are based on, those old commands. So for example, you would use diskini on your Coco to initialize a new floppy. That's what I'm going to use to create a new virtual hard drive. And so since I can't remember anything, I have a little cheat sheet up here, so I'm just going to paste that in. What this does is it creates a new disk file called HDB-A. -H21 says use the hard drive format and give me 21 floppies inside. So I do that, boom, much faster than doing this on Radio Shack DOS. And if I do a dir, I'll see I have this file. It's all set up with all the floppies ready to go. And I can test it out. So I can say, how much space is free on floppy number 20? Since we have 21 floppies, the biggest index I can use for the floppies are 20, because we start counting at 0. So how much free space is on floppy 20? 68 granules. And that also helps me verify that it actually exists. I can also do a dir and ask what files are on it. There are none. What about floppy 19? What about floppy 0? There's nothing. They're all empty. They're ready to go. It's worth pointing out what some of this syntax means. This comma indicates that I want this command to go into this hard drive. So for example, there's a copy command, and you need to be able to differentiate between copying a file to this file on your host disk system versus a virtual floppy inside that file as treated like a virtual hard drive. So this comma just means the thing before me is a virtual hard drive, treat it like that, and the command is going into it. It's going to operate on a floppy within it. The colon says I'm going to pick which floppy drive I'm referring to within that hard drive. So colon means which floppy, comma means the preceding should be treated like a virtual hard drive. So now I have my file ready to plug into DriveWire, and I can boot up my Coco and start connecting to it. Okay, I have my Coco connected to my PC through the DriveWire cable. I opened up the DriveWire software. I have it set to be on COM3, which is the COM port that I'm connected to. And now I'm going to turn on my Coco, and then we should see it show up here. The picture quality is terrible, but well, that's what we've got. And it would seem like I should be ready to go, like I could start issuing the commands and I would be able to back up onto the DriveWire. But the Coco does not know anything about DriveWire yet. It's still running the usual Disk Extended Color Basic that's based on the cartridge that's plugged into it. So we need to load the HDB-DOS software onto the Coco so it will know to go out the serial port when it communicates with DriveWire. So the DriveWire zip file that you could find online at the Cloud9 website has a bunch of different options of how you get the HDB-DOS software. I'm going with this one. I have a Coco 2. I just need the regular HDB-DOS for Coco 2. So I have my output of the computer, the audio output, set up to go into the cassette input of the Coco. So I'm going to play that WAV file like it was a cassette, and I'm going to load it into the Coco. So I'll do a cload m. It's sitting there waiting, and I'll run my WAV file. ready to go. Now, since that takes about a minute, you might want to streamline that process for next time. And if so, you can save that WAV file onto your floppy, a physical floppy. So next time you just pop a floppy into your floppy drive, physical, and then you can load it, and that'll go much faster than the cassette version. Any machine language program that you load in, you can find out the start, end, and exec address by using these peaks. So 487 and 48 together form a 16-bit number to give you the start, and similarly these give you the end, these give you the execs. So if you run this on the Coco, you'll get 3 numbers, and in this case I got 1, 2, 3, these numbers here. And then you can use that in a savem command to save whatever file you want, in this case the HDB-DOS file, over to a floppy, and that'll just be faster for next time. So now that it's here, let's see if I can exec it and connect. So it looks like I'm connected. In fact, I think I saw something pop up here that tells me that the DriveWire app also knows that everyone is all connected and happy. So now in DriveWire, I'm going to go ahead and load up that empty disk file that I created using Toolshed. So I just click on the little window there. There's my file. And so now in theory, I should be able to use the Coco to take a look at this. So remember, drive with the # will get me to the hard drive. So I don't really have to do that because 0 is the default anyway, but I'm going to do it. And then if I wanted to look at the floppy drive 0 from that hard drive, I would do that. And again, I don't have to because 0 is the default, but I'm going to do a dir. And we saw something popped up here, and then we have our answer here. And remember, I have like a bunch of drives there. I could go up to drive 10, and I can ask for its data, and there's nothing there either. So it looks like I'm kind of ready to go, but I do need to do that drive off command. So that means that if I use drives 0 to 3, I'm going to my physical floppy drive, and anything bigger than 3, and I'm going up to here. So now I'm going to pop in my floppy, putting my physical floppy into my physical floppy drive, and I will do a drive. I did a drive off already. So I'm going to set my current drive to 0. That should be my physical drive, and now I'll do a dir. And that's what's on my physical drive. So finally, I can do my backup. So I'm going to back up from 0, my physical floppy, to 4, which is the first accessible number I have on my virtual hard drive through DriveWire. And we're done. So let's see if that worked. I'm going to do a dir 5 to prove that that should be empty. That's going to go to DriveWire, and there's nothing there. I backed up to 4, so let's do a dir 4. And all this stuff is there. So if I made that be my default drive, then I could try running one of these things. I could try running Wumpus, Wumpus, Wumpus. And there we go, it's up and running. Another thing I could do to verify this is to use Toolshed to go directly into that disk file and see what Toolshed says. So let's give that a try. So I have my Windows command prompt up here. In this directory I have my disk file. So I'm going to ask it to do a dir inside HDBA disk. The comma says I'm going inside, and I want to take a look at floppy 4. So let's see what it says. Looks like it's got it all there. And if I were to do, drive 5, there'd be nothing. Drive 6, there'd be nothing. If I tried to do 0, there'd be nothing. But everything that I just copied was on 4. So cool. So you just do this over and over again with all your floppies. But you may hit a floppy that doesn't work. And that happened to me. So I went through a bunch, and one of my floppies didn't work. I'm going to show you what that looks like. So I'm going to copy a floppy that is known to fail and we're going to see what kind of fireworks we get. Alright, I just inserted the known bad floppy, so I'm going to try backing that up. Back up. 0, I'm going to put that on 5 and check it out. So it seems to have taken almost the exact amount of time as a successful one, and then at the very end it said, oh, by the way, I failed. Ha ha. But let's see what actually happened. If I do a dir 5 to see what got copied, it actually looks like a lot of stuff made it there. But there were probably some sectors that were bad, and so I probably have some bits in there that didn't get over properly, and then when I try to run these programs, bad things will happen. So when this happens, and it's time to go a little bit manual, and for that you can use the copy command. So copy will let you copy just a single file. So let's say I'll do copy, let's see, buzz, and I'll copy that over to drive. Now I'll try 6, since 5 is filled up with the bad backup. I'm going to copy that over to 6. Just kidding. You have to give it a name. Just kidding. I have to make sure I'm setting drive 0 as my main drive. Third time's the charm. Although the copy might still fail. Maybe this is the bad file. Nope, that was the good file. So if I do a dir 6, I'll see that it's there, and in theory I should be able to run it and it'll be okay. But then I kind of need to do this for everything else. So I need to go one by one, and then eventually I'll hit the bad file, and then I'll just be sad that I can't get to that one anymore. And then I'll just go up to the Color Computer Archive and see if they have it instead. So that's the overview of how I got everything from the Coco onto my PC. Well, I now have large virtual hard drive files containing all of my floppies, but what I'd like to do is separate them into individual virtual floppy files so that it's a little more easy to deal with. And then I won't even need DriveWire when I'm using an emulator like XRoar. But this has gone on long enough, so we'll do that in part 2.